Hello.
We're just going to do a bit of furniture arranging. We decided that we wanted to face each other a bit more. Thank you, Offa, for the introduction and for having us. Hello, everyone. I'm Yumiko, and this is Jenny. We're both medical doctors, so I thought maybe we'd start by telling you about each other. So, Jenny, can you tell us what sort of doctor you were that made you burn out, and what sort of doctor you are now? Because I'm guessing it's a little bit different after burnout.
It is a bit different. I think it's a better different, actually. And I say that with all sincerity. I thought I was a really good doctor before I burnt out, because I was very committed, I was very passionate, I was living the dream because I'd always wanted to set up my own group medical practice, which I did here in Perth. I was up in Ocean Reef for many, many years, loved my work, loved my patients, loved my staff. Everything was going really well. I had 2 small children, I had a husband that loved me, who was often away on business, and everything was great. Except when you're somebody who cares a lot for everybody else, somebody who always wants to go the extra mile because you care so much, because you want to do the right thing by the people that you're looking after, I forgot to include myself in the mix. So I recognized I was getting very tired, but being a perfectionist, a bit of an imposter, wanting to make sure I was good enough to be the doctor.
Or you thought you were an imposter?
I thought I was an imposter, yeah. I chose to completely ignore any warning signs and found myself in an osteopath's office, passed out on the floor. Now, burnout doesn't happen overnight. It takes a little while for the penny to drop, and, well, I did drop. And it wasn't until that particular occasion, and I then went home and never stepped foot in my practice again and lost my business, that I realized what I had enabled to happen through my denial and through my personality, which drove me to finally burn out. So big lessons learned. I took a gap year. Highly recommend a gap year. So wasted on the young.
I taken one when I was 17.
Well, I never got the chance.
Did you take one? No, neither did I. No. Maybe that's why.
Gap years, highly recommend them.
Yeah.
So I took a gap year basically to heal and recover. And then after that, decided I'd had so much fun learning about the world and about everything else that I took another gap year.
I think we should take one every other year.
I think they should be a regular thing, just slot it in. And then I thought, well, what do you do now? Because the only thing I knew was medicine, and it had all been my self-identity. That was who I was. But I knew that if I went back into general practice, I would end up the same.
But why is that? Why do you think it would happen again?
Because I am very committed and passionate about doing the right thing and helping others. I've always wanted to be of service to people. That's what drives me. That's what gets me up in the morning. I love assisting other people to be the best version of themselves. But I knew I had to reinvent myself, so I became a slightly different doctor. So I'm now what's called a lifestyle medicine physician, which basically looks at prevention first. Lifestyle medicine is all about, what can I do to help you stay well? What's going on that's causing you not to feel as well at the moment that we can help you to do differently, that's going to get you a better outcome? So that's my new modus operandi.
Well, and I have to say, if you don't mind me interrupting there, that sounds like you're a super specialist GP now.
Oh, I like the sound.
Yeah, because I feel like everything you did as a GP, because there's a lot of preventive medicine within general practice, it just sounds like you found your niche area, and now you're a super specialist in what you're already doing before.
Burnout changed me into a different kind of doctor. And I think it's a better kind, but I don't work in clinical practice anymore. I work in the workplace because many of the people I was seeing when I was working as a GP were super stressed, they were depressed, they had anxiety issues, they had issues with bullying, intimidation, harassment, etc., often emanating from this place called work. And I thought, that's where I need to be. to help rectify that a bit more.
And given that you want to help people, and you still are with what you're doing now.
Very much so.
And you identified that as the reason why you burnt out. What do you think is stopping you from burning out again? Because you're still giving and giving and giving with this new job. So what I'm trying to tease out here is, were there other factors about the general practice environment, maybe occupational factors, rather than you? Because I'm hearing a lot of individual factors right now. You wanting to care too much, but were there some other things external to you, do you think, that contributed to you burning out in general practice before, which is different to your current environment? Totally.
I think what I've come to understand is that while burnout is a personal experience, it's not just what the individual sets themselves up to experience, because we're all slightly different, but it's very much the environment that we find ourselves in. And I'm very keen to hear about your experience about
mine was
this.
Mainly environment, it wasn't me. No, just kidding. Just kidding. You know, I'm not the sociopath in this talk.
when you sign up to go to medical school, you know you're signing up for hard work, a lot of hard work, a lot of exams, and you expect to just keep on, keeping on, because that's what you're there for. You've got something that you want to achieve. But I also realized that there was much in that environment which was actually very toxic. And one of the reasons I'd actually always wanted to go into general practice and not hospital medicine, but my experience of hospital medicine made me know 110% I did not want to stay in hospital medicine because of what I heard and what I saw. I find it very interesting that in the caring profession, we can be so bad at caring about each other. Absolutely appalling. And unfortunately, I don't think it's improving at the moment. There's a way to go.
I don't think so either. And I wish I had that realization that you had a little bit earlier. Yeah.
So Yumiko, your experience was obviously different from mine. Tell us what happened to you.
It was a little bit different, but I do identify with some of the kind of personality factors as well, because there definitely are personality traits that do make people more vulnerable to burning out, and we will talk about those in a moment. And same as you, I'm also an empath, I'm also a perfectionist, and I was also extremely stubborn and didn't want to see the early signs of burnout. So I probably pushed myself a little bit too far, and I definitely relate to what you're saying about how it's just persistent, isn't it? You're just like a hamster on a wheel and you just don't know when you can come off. You're too scared to come off because you might fly off and die. So it does feel like that sometimes working in a hospital, for sure.
Yeah.
And I do remember getting fed a lot of those sort of toxic messages early on. As a medical student, I remember working on a surgical unit, and they used to say, knife before wife. And that was cool for all of the men on that surgical unit to say that, because surgery was more important than family. And so these were the kind of messages I was hearing as a young girl. I mean, I was a girl. I started medical school at 17. And so I was still very impressionable at that age. And you know what? Maybe I should have taken a gap year at that time. I think if I'd taken a year off to explore the world and understand myself a bit better, I might have been maybe a bit more mature and able to cope with some of the things without believing every message I was being told, I guess. But I was very enticed by surgery, loved it from the beginning, all I wanted to do. But I eventually burnt out in the hospital system. And for me, it was just the hours. It was relentless. And for a while, I was fine with it. I was coping. But my very final term it was just physically beyond what I could manage. It was a lot of 24-hour on-call shifts, not being able to sleep. Towards the end, I was doing 10 24-hour shifts a fortnight. And I don't think that's sustainable for a very long time.
No.
And it's interesting that you mentioned fainting, because there are a lot of physical manifestations to stress. When you're working long hours, when you're in a very stressful environment, it's not just feeling tired or it's not just a feeling, you feel it physically.
Yeah.
And I guess if we want to be really nerdy and talk about the physiology, the hormones and neurotransmitters that are going wild in your body when you're stressed, they do things to your organs and all of your bodily systems.
Yep.
So
Yep.
for me, unfortunately, it was my gut. So I was having stomach pains, and on the way to work one day, I shut myself. And that's when I knew something was really wrong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I didn't faint. I kind of wish I had fainted. That might have been a bit of...
That might have been less awkward.
Yeah, it would have been a bit of a cleaner way to get the message. I was in my car. Of course, I was wearing my best underpants as well. It's always when you're wearing a matching number.
When you got your best undies on.
Yeah, I don't even know why I was wearing such nice underwear to work, but I have not seen those undies. They're on the side of the road, so I'm sorry to whoever drove past Lane Cove National Park after me, but I was not putting them back on. And this was actually pre-COVID times, but I don't know why I had some hand sanitizer in my car, so cleaned myself up and went to work commando that day. And I just kept working even after that. Just
and nobody
smiled.
knew. Nobody knew.
No one had any idea that I was walking around smiling, good morning, everyone, with no underpants on. It was just, I just had to keep going because there was no one else to replace me. I was pretty much a one-person team on my own running the unit. There were surgeries to do, patients to see in the emergency department, another 24-hour on-call shift to do. So I had no other choice really but to keep going. But it kept going. Didn't get any empathy from any of my colleagues. They didn't really care that I was burning out to the point where I was physically breaking down.
Do you think they noticed? Or did you think they chose not to see?
That's a good question. I didn't even stop to think what they were seeing. I don't think they really cared, to be honest. As long as the work was done, doesn't matter who's doing it and what state they're in, as long as the unit keeps running, I guess. But eventually, I knew that things were only going to get worse because two of my colleagues wanted to take some holiday, annual leave, and I would be covering even more hours. And I just thought, none of this kind of distress is being noticed. So I eventually made the hard decision to leave. And at that stage, I had been working for 8 years towards something that I really didn't have a plan B for because I didn't think I would fail. And I think that's also maybe not a good thing to not have a plan B. But, I was always an optimistic, happy-go-lucky kind of person. Like, I was like, I'll make it. I had confidence in myself. Didn't think I would ever find myself in a situation where I was going to walk away from it. But eventually, I didn't really have a choice because I was that run down and I was sick. Yeah, it's so hard for doctors to admit when they're sick.
Oh, it's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
It's really embarrassing.
We're meant to be the healers.
You're a doctor?
Yeah, we're not allowed to get sick, are we?
No.
And how about you? When and how did you feel when you were deciding to walk away from GP? What was that experience like?
I didn't have a choice because I had literally collapsed in a heap. So I was at home feeling incredibly guilty, ashamed, because I felt I'd let everybody down. But I also felt like I'd been running at full pelt into a brick wall, knowing that the brick wall was about to hit me, but I couldn't stop running into it.
It's not platform 9 3/4, right?
No.
Where you go on the other side and it's like Hogwarts and it's amazing. No. Solid wall.
Really quite weird. And it was this compulsion, and I think because many of us, when we're driven, when we've got this goal, and this is what we're aiming to achieve, you just keep on running, and you run, and you run, and you run. But then it's unsustainable. We're human. And I think we've lost sight of that side of us and what enables us to actually be our best selves. We've adhered to the old thinking that in order to be successful, you just have to gird your loins and stiff upper lip and just keep on going, and don't let the side down. Whereas really, that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. I got really angry. A couple of years ago, I heard Jack Ma talking in the owners. We set up Alibaba when he said the only way to be successful is to follow the 996 rule. I don't know if you know what the 996 rule is. Thou shalt work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. Really.
Oh, well, have fun with that, because I don't do that anymore.
It's so much fun. And then, of course, we have the delightful Elon Musk, who has come out very recently saying that, everybody's got to go back to work, despite the fact we've just been living through this pandemic for the last few years and we're all feeling a bit frayed around the edges. And his comment was something around, well, if you want to be successful, you have to put in a minimum of 80 hours a week, preferably 100 if you can. And he, are you a robot or what? Because that's ridiculous. I mean, all the science tells us we function best if we are going to be at this place called work for about 40, 45 hours a week. But how many hours do people work normally? And the pandemic, I think, has amplified what was wrong before.
Before, yes.
Because working from home, the mental load of not just doing the work, but you're homeschooling and you're trying to sort of look after the family and do everything else. It's been a nightmare. And we know that the average person has been putting in an additional 2 to 3 hours of work every day. Every day. So we need to I think, rethink how we want work to be. Because burnout is described or defined as an occupational syndrome, isn't it? Do you want to talk to a bit about
I'm
what
quite
burnout
passionate
is?
about that.
Yeah.
And also, I feel you, because I felt a lot of guilt and shame as well when I quit. And the system kind of gaslights you when you leave. You're the one that was weak.
Yes.
You're the one who's letting us down. She's the problem, he's the problem, they're the problem.
And that's not true.
And it's not true.
That is so not true.
Yeah, and I like that now we're starting to recognize that there are other factors that lead to burning out. So there are different ways that we define diseases. There's the ICD, which is the International Classification of Diseases, and then we've also got a diagnostic statistical manual as well. I don't know why we have two systems, but
we like jargon. We like all these acronyms.
We like categorizing
things,
don't we? We just like to put everything in boxes. But, so the International Classification of Diseases now recognizes burnout as an occupational thing. It's still not a medical condition as such.
You're not allowed to call it a medical condition.
We're not allowed to call it a disease, but that may change in the future, we'll see. But we at least have come to a point where medically we can look at someone who's burnt out and see that it's a multifactorial thing. And often there are a lot of external occupational reasons why they're burning out. And I think that's important, because otherwise we end up blaming the individual. And I do love the phrase of the canary in the coal mine.
Oh, yes.
The solution is not to make stronger canaries, like the mine is toxic. So
that's right.
I think that's reframing burnout in that way is so important, because the thing is, the people who do burnout tend to be the ones who are empathetic, we're feelers, we feel things, we blame ourselves. So I think it is hard for people who do burnout, because they probably feel really bad about it.
So my question to you is, do sociopaths burn out?
They're definitely less likely to burn out. How do you feel about that?
I would agree with you.
Yeah. Should we define what sociopath is first? Because I know,
yes,
we casually call people psychos and sociopaths and stuff.
But I think we have to be a bit careful about.
We do have to be careful. So
labels.
What is a sociopath from like a doctor point of view? How do you define sociopath?
I see somebody who has sociopathic tendencies as somebody who is socially deviant. They don't experience the same range of emotions that we would. They can demonstrate them at a more superficial level. So we can, especially for psychopathic, be sucked into thinking, oh yes, they're expressing happiness or grief or whatever, but they're not actually registering it physically in the same way that we do.
Yeah.
So if you're really happy, you can just feel that glow inside.
Oh, I feel it. Yeah, endorphins.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
Whereas a sociopath doesn't. And
they can still smile, but it's kind of like
yes,
a smiling
smile.
assassin type thing, isn't it?
It is.
Where they know the cues. They know that
they know the cues, they recognize the cues.
Smiling equals happy, but they might not feel it.
Exactly. And I think the issue is less that sociopaths are less likely to burn out, but more that the sociopath is quite likely to end up in a position of leadership. And that is the danger. Because if they are your leader, they are your boss, they have no empathy for what you're going through.
They don't care if you burn out.
They don't care.
As long as you keep working.
Keep working. We'll just work harder, will you? And I think this is why it's really important to ensure that we're all on the same page, understanding what burnout actually is, because I think there's still a lot of ignorance.
Yep.
I'm always being told that people have heard, well, no, they think they're burning out, they've spoken to their boss, and their boss says, oh no, you're just a bit stressed, you're probably a bit depressed as well, go to your GP, they'll put you on some antidepressants, it'll all be fine. Well, of course, that's not true, because they've got the wrong understanding of what burnout actually is, which is too much exposure to chronic stress over a prolonged period of time. And we know that physiologically what that does to our body is it increases not only cortisol, the major stress hormone, but it puts our bodies in an inflammatory state.
Yep.
We're more likely to get other illnesses. We might develop a mood disorder, such as depression as well. They can coexist. But burnout itself is a different thing. I think we need to differentiate, because did you have depression with your burnout?
I did, yeah. So let's talk about how tiredness is different to burnout, which is also different to depression, because there's a lot of overlap. So I guess, like you say, you might have a boss who goes, oh, you're just a bit tired. But with burnout, it's different to just feeling tired, because even if you take a whole week off, have a nice holiday and come back, you won't feel better. And that's the difference. So if you're acutely stressed, let's say you've got a few days of a really difficult time at work, if you take yourself away from it, have a break and come back, you'll probably feel better. And we've all had those experiences. We've all had bad days at work. But burnout, as you say, I think the important defining part of it is it's chronic.
It's very chronic.
Yes. It's for a prolonged amount of time. And yes, tiredness is a part of it, so that kind of physical and emotional exhaustion, we've all felt that. But there's also other aspects of it that make it burnout. So the idea of the sociopath thing, if you lose empathy or if you start to feel cynical, that could be an early sign of burnout. So for some people, it might not be the tiredness that presents itself when you're starting to burn out. It might be that you're feeling cynical. You might be cynical about your colleagues, cynical about the job itself. So that sort of feeling. And so that's why it is more difficult for sociopaths to burn out, because they don't have the empathy to lose in the first place.
That's right.
And if you are an empath, you have a lot more to lose, and you feel things a lot more. It feels heavier for you. So in the spectrum of things, empaths do tend to have a more severe form of burnout, I guess.
Now they say that more women than men burn out. Do you think that's true?
Yeah. How about you?
I think it's true, but I think we overlook how many men do actually experience burnout. And I think it's because they experience it differently from women. I think for us as women who have had that lived experience, for me, and certainly from what it sounds like for you, it was the level of beyond exhaustion, mentally, physically, and cognitively. But for the men, they might not have that level of fatigue. It's the cynicism that may come to the fore more.
Yes.
So it's about and this is again to why we have to remember that it's not one particular way it shows up for a person. It's multifaceted, and it can present in a number of different ways. So I think it's just being open to the idea and to really get better at checking in with ourselves and checking in with how we're doing things.
I think also it can be more difficult for some men to admit that they're burning out, especially if they're in their environment. There's a lot of toxic masculinity. And I certainly saw that in surgery where it's very much a bro culture, lad culture, and the person who's worked the most hours, the person who's saved the most lives, who's done the most operations, they get the trophy. So it's a very competitive environment. And when you're in that sort of toxic culture, it's really hard to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And again, I think when we look at positions of leadership, as what you were saying before, it's a problem when sociopaths make it to the top because they don't recognize and understand the people who are working for them or with them. And so I do feel like this is changing though. I feel like we celebrate vulnerability a bit more and authentic leadership. So when we have leaders who are a bit more empathetic, it does lead to a change in culture, because I always say the fish rots from the head.
It's very true. And I think we have to be careful not to label all leaders as potentially being psychopaths or...
Oh no, we've seen some
we know that there is a high proportion that have the tendencies, but I think you're right, it's about giving ourselves permission to share how we really feel, not because and to do it freely because we know we're not going to be judged or thought of as being a lesser person or being weak or not up for the job, or you're thinking of applying for that, you clearly can't do it. All that sort of stuff, that is starting to shift, and it needs to shift, but it's not shifting fast enough because at the moment we are seeing rising levels of burnout across so many different industries. I mean, health, unfortunately, is still one of the poster children for burnout.
And it's gotten even worse.
And it's got worse.
Of the pandemic.
The number of nurses who are beyond burnout and are quitting, really just walking out, leaving their profession. They can't take it anymore.
I don't blame them.
I don't blame them either.
Yeah.
And the other allied health professionals exactly in the same position. And then we've got the educators and the teachers. So many teachers I've spoken to are feeling broken. They entered their profession because they had a passion and a desire to do what they do. But the system is just wearing them out. I'm sure you've heard the expression as well of karoshi.
Yes.
Yeah. Karoshi is the Japanese term for death from overwork. It's a real thing, isn't it?
It's a real thing, yeah.
And it affects men and women. It means that you die prematurely, either from having a stroke or a heart attack, or you might commit suicide. In China, the last estimate I saw was 500,000 Chinese people die from burnout a year.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah. And in Japan, it's recognized to be such a problem, they have now installed a karoshi hotline. Where if people are thinking they are seriously at risk of burning out, they can phone somebody to speak to, because it's a big issue.
And lots of young people are dying too. There was a very high-profile news story in Japan of a 31-year-old woman dying from heart failure. And, it's usually something that happens in the elderly population, heart failure. So for someone to be that under the pump, where their pump has failed, it's just... wild.
Scary. Very scary.
Really scary to be that young and healthy and then to die from heart failure because you're working
too hard. I mean,
and why do we work that hard that we die? Like, what a waste of a good life.
Absolutely. Work is not worth dying for.
And I don't know why we glorify it so much. Like, burnout is almost fetishized. It's like, it's cool to work that much.
Well, you have to be busy, don't you?
Yeah.
Super busy, crazy busy.
I hate that word. I don't want to be busy, not anymore. And I think, we can laugh about it now because we've recovered.
Yes,
but
it's not fun when you're going through it.
It's not fun to recover from it. And, we're alive, thankfully.
Yes.
Many others have died, as you said, the karoshi. But I guess I don't want to downplay how serious burnout can be.
Absolutely.
I don't know about you, but it took me 4 years to recover from burnout.
Well, I took my 2 gap years.
Oh, yeah, that's right,
and it was a slow process after that, because I had to reevaluate what was really important to me, how I could utilize my skill set, because I was still passionate about medicine, and to create something that I could do usefully, but would also allow me to stay safe.
And that rebuilding process takes
time.
A long time, and
Takes a long
it's
time.
also part of recovery concurrently,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yep,
Because you
it
have
is.
to make a plan for yourself to stop yourself from going there again.
Yep. Because we can.
Oh yeah, we're vulnerable.
We're very vulnerable,
Yeah.
and
So
I've
we've-
met people who have had several episodes of
Yes.
burnout. It's like depression, isn't it? Sometimes you have an episode of depression, and hopefully that might be the only time. But we also know that you are more at risk then of having repeated episodes of depression in exactly the same way you can get burnout too.
Yeah, so let's briefly talk about some of the things that might make you more vulnerable. So we talked
Yes.
about perfectionism,
Yep.
being
Those-
an empath.
Yep.
What else is
Interesting, I was reading that the millennial generation are actually burning out at a higher rate.
I'm a millennial, technically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
There you go.
1987.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. So the millennial generation are particularly at risk. And, well, you can explain then, why should that be? Why are the millennials at greater risk of burnout than,
I actually
say,
don't
the
know.
baby
Why am
boomers?
I more? Why am I more vulnerable? Because I would have thought that we are actually more into the flexible lifestyle.
Yeah.
So if anything, I thought maybe that might be a protective factor.
Yeah.
But maybe I've not been thinking.
Maybe our audience has got some ideas what they think
Yeah.
is the reason why millennials have been
We'll do a
discovered to be-
Q&A at the end.
We'll do a
If
Q&A as to why
If you are a
what you think.
millennial and you
We'd
know the
love
answer
to
to
know,
this, please
yes.
tell me, because that might unlock a few
Yeah.
truths for me as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
One of the things that I've been wondering about in relation to that is the sense of disconnection and loneliness in our society. We are living in a place where more and more people have fewer friends. And of course the pandemic made it so hard to interact face to face. We had to wear these face masks. And you can get so much information from the eyes.
That's true, yeah.
But there's so much, you'll be seeing out that half of the face. When
I imagine that would be
people-
hard for especially young kids.
Very hard for young
Yeah.
kids, and hard, I think, for the older generations. I think
Especially if you're hard of hearing as well,
if you're
because you
hard
can't
at,
read
yes,
the lips.
yeah. My
Yeah.
90-year-old mother, deaf as a doorpost. Oh, I can't hear. Can you speak up? Yes, Mum, I'm here. Try the other ear. Oh, I can hear you a bit better now. But she's deaf as a doorpost, and she is in an aged care home in the UK. I haven't seen her since 2019. And she is now allowed 2 designated visitors, and they have to wear face masks. And they are now actually allowed into her room, which is better, so they could sit sort of like this far away from. Before that, she had a perspex screen in front of her, and she was trying to interpret what my brother might have been saying to her. She would have no idea at all. So the social interaction was completely gone, which means that you're feeling very disconnected from the world, essentially. And I think the older generation have had it particularly hard with COVID, and I think the younger generation, Gen Zs and millennials possibly, and I'd be keen to find out what the audience thinks
I
about
actually
this.
loved it. It was like joy of missing out. I'm actually okay with not having that many
You had
friends.
JOMO.
I had JOMO.
You had lots of JOMO,
I was
not
okay
FOMO.
with it. Yeah. I'm actually okay with not having that many friends. It can get a bit tiring. I used to be a social butterfly. I was definitely an extrovert in school, but I don't know, it could be a little bit my mental health, just wanting to retreat a little bit more.
Yeah,
but
it's
now
interesting,
I kind of like hanging out with myself. Yeah, I like reading a book with a cup of tea and having some me time. So I was actually okay during the pandemic, but I imagine that other people who are a bit more extroverted might have found it
more
really
challenging.
difficult not to have that social interaction.
Do you think that change in how you interact with other people was also related to your recovery from burnout?
Yes, definitely. I changed. I've become a lot more introverted, and I wonder whether that's me kind of practicing self-preservation, preserving my energy, because when you do go to lots of parties and things, it's a lot of effort to say hello to people and converse, and it's just easier not to go out anymore. But I do sometimes think, you know, was it because I went through depression that I don't want to go out so much anymore? It's possible, it's possible. But even now, even though I'm fully recovered and I'm off all medications now I'm like, I'm okay with this new me. I'm okay with doing quiet things on my own now. So, but I do think that because I went through such a severe experience that maybe this is me protecting myself from that again. But yeah, I definitely went through depression after burnout. Interestingly, I think a lot of people who get diagnosed with burnout or recognized as having burnout from their GP already meet the criteria for depression. So there's certainly a lot of overlap, even though there's not the same thing. And people who already have major depression are more vulnerable to burning out. So there's definitely overlap, but I guess it's important for us to differentiate the two things, because like we said, burnout is more an occupational thing. So we don't want those kind of bosses who go, take some antidepressants and you'll be fine. Because it's not a cure. Not appropriate. Or it's not an appropriate way to manage someone who's burning out. We need to think about, are they working too much? Are they working safe working hours? Are they doing the role of two people? All of those things. So there's
there's a lot of that about.
There is a lot of that.
Especially can you do more with less, please?
Yes. Well,
we've got staff off with budget. We've got staff off on holidays.
Because they're sick or they're in isolation because you know, the partner had COVID, whatever. So there's been a lot of that in the last few years of having to cover for other people and not being expected to do all of that without saying anything, because you don't want to be you don't want to be seen as a wuss. Yes, and we all have to be team players, right? So if we don't cover for someone, you're not a good, team player if you do that. Right. So there's a lot of that. So I do feel that healthcare has its own unique issues that make people more likely to burn out, because there is that pressure to always cover for others, and also because of the nature of the job. We're helping people who are sick or have really terrible injuries, and so most people who enter the profession do it because they are altruistic. And sometimes I do feel that hospital administrators and bosses, they tend to exploit that inherent altruism of their employees, and I think that's possibly one of the issues in the healthcare system, because there's this expectation that because you entered the profession to look after other people. Of course you'll say, yes, I'll stay late and take another shift. Yeah, and not be expected to get any pay or anything. All this, hours and hours of overtime with no pay. It's that's the kind of culture, I guess, that we've come from. So I've made it my mission to start making burnout redundant at work. It's a big project. A little bit of work to do. But I think one thing we can do is to recognise that this has to be a joint venture. Because I think it's about recognising what we can do as individuals to take better care of ourselves. And can I just say, I get a bit angry about this sometimes, but it is not about having more resilience training. You do not need more resilience training. You are more than resilient enough. Yes. Oh, got that off my chest. Yeah, that won't fix anything. And while I love getting pamper packages, a pamper package does not fix burnout. No. One yoga class is not going to fix it. And not one yoga class, or even two. Yoga. No, that's not going to fix it either. No, that's not going to fix it either. So I think we need to look at what self-care means to us in terms of sustainable work. What is relevant to us, because we're all different? What are our boundaries? We can have a discussion about boundaries. Oh yeah, I'm so bad at setting boundaries. I'm getting better though. Yeah. It takes time to learn, doesn't it? It does, yeah. Change our behaviour and our habits. Tricky. And I think the other thing is to recognise that the way we show up, sure, we've got personality traits and beliefs and values and etc., but it's the environment that we find ourselves operating in. So I think really, in order to make burnout redundant, we have to address what's going on up top. If we can reimagine leadership and middle management and what it's like in the trenches,
and put together a burnout prevention strategy. Wouldn't that be better?
It would be good.
It would be good, wouldn't it? Because then
everybody...
A lot
of it's education though, isn't it?
It's all about
educating the people at the
education.
top about what it is and what they can do to protect the people they're meant to be looking after, the employees.
So it's education and awareness. It's not about resilience training. And then...
And not doing all these modules in your spare time. You need to do all these online modules to learn about resilience and burnout.
No more, take them away. And then looking at small tweaks that we can put in place, maybe for our own way of doing things, because I don't know about you, Yumiko, but I know that I sometimes make work for myself.
Oh, all the time.
Because, you know, I do things in a certain way and they're often ineffective and take far longer.
And I don't know how to switch off sometimes. My sister says, I have no chill. I just don't know how to chill out sometimes. So sometimes I have to force myself to do that. Even, and you know, we did say, oh no, it's not about yoga, but yoga is part of mindfulness. And
I love yoga.
I love yoga too, but it's not for everyone. No. But there are so many different ways that you can be mindful and introduce mindfulness into your life, which has been shown to help prevent burnout.
For sure.
But one really easy thing you can do is to put your phone away at dinner. I mean, how many of you actually do that? I always have my phone there.
You make your kids put their phones away.
And it's just one simple thing to just not have your phone for 20, 30 minutes while you're eating. And because mindfulness just means to be aware of your senses and your surroundings, right? So if you can just enjoy your meal uninterrupted, that could be your one sweet moment of mindfulness a day. And it can make a difference. I think it's all about small, easy to make changes rather than, oh my God, I have to sign up for a new yoga studio membership. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be something small, like going outside for a walk, looking at the change in the color of the leaves, the smell, the feeling of the wind on your skin. And when you're eating, it might be the colors on your plate, the different textures, the crunchy sounds when you're eating a carrot. All those little things that you notice might be your one small moment of mindfulness, but that can make a little bit of a difference.
Massive.
And, you know, a lot of people feel intimidated by yoga, like, oh, I don't think my joints can bend that far, or...
Well, maybe not now, but keep going, you might.
Yeah, that's true. Or a lot of people find it difficult to meditate, especially, you know...
Meditation isn't for everybody.
It's really hard to do, especially if you've got a busy mind and you've got a lot going on. It's really hard to stay still. So even though meditation, yoga, they're fantastic, and if you're able to do them, great. There's so many other ways. So I guess I would encourage everyone to find something that is mindful, that suits you, because we all have different tastes and things that we're more likely to stick to. If you like something, you're more likely to stick with it, right? So I think that's one of the challenges, to find a mindfulness activity that you like and you'll stick with.
Yep. And that's the thing, isn't it? Stickability.
Yeah.
So what are the key activities that you try to do regularly, preferably daily, that help you to stay in that calm, more mindful space?
For me, it's exercise. Any sort of physical activity is good for you. For me, it's not about resilience, it's about resistance training. So I'm actually a body pump teacher now, part-time.
Are you?
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone here loves their Les Mills classes. I love it. I teach body pump, I teach RPM, and that's...
What's RPM?
Oh, like cycling?
Oh, cycling, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it's not exactly calm, it's very high intensity, doof music, but for me, that's what keeps me healthy and happy. And, you know, physical activity doesn't have to be intense like that. It can be going for a nice walk or a swim. But for me, when I was going through depression, my psychiatrist said to me, the current recommendation for good mental health is 3 sessions of resistance exercise a week. And me being me, I knew I wouldn't do it. But I thought, well, if I do a course and I become a body pump instructor, then I can't not show up to my class. So that's how I forced myself to get my resistance. I mean, I love it. I've always enjoyed going to body pump classes, but I thought, oh, maybe I'll be an instructor. And I love it. So now every week I come up with my playlist, pick the songs that I like, and it's kind of like going to disco with a barbell. It's great.
But isn't it interesting how we have to sort of find ways
to make yourself
to
do
make
stuff?
ourselves
Yeah.
do stuff that we know that we would love and enjoy?
Yep.
And you had to go and do the course to become the teacher and then do it. I've got two things around exercise. One is I love being outside in nature. For me, being outside, a sunny day, perfect. Windy day, great, blows all the cobwebs out. Rainy day, well, that's great, get all these lovely smells and things. So being outside, we've got dogs, so I have to take the dog for a walk, because otherwise it's like...
That's good for therapy too.
And it's very good having a dog anyway. So walking the dog, being out in nature, and like you say, the research has shown that exercise is so good for our mental health.
Yes.
They're now releasing new guidelines shortly, which will be encouraging doctors to, instead of reaching for the prescription pad, to write out anti-anxiolytics or antidepressants, exercise.
Yeah, and
looking
also,
at healthy nutrition.
Yes, and also
sleep.
Refer to our colleagues. Exercise physiologists. They're great physios. When I was really, really unwell, I could barely move. Sometimes I was in bed for 3 days. It was like wearing lead pajamas. I did not want to move. I felt like I couldn't move because my body just felt that heavy. Yeah. But what really helped me when I was that physically incapacitated was to start going to see an exercise physiologist who helped me get my strength back again. And so it took a long time, but sometimes you do need to go and see another professional who will help you out. Yep. And so I agree. I think that, sometimes we forget about allied health professionals, but there are so many people out there who do all these amazing things, and we don't refer to them.
Yeah, a big difference to how quickly we recover.
Yeah.
I had a most beautiful psychologist I went to, and she enlightened me in so many aspects. And I think one of the first questions that I was asked was, and how did you contribute to this, Jenny? Because I was in victim mode.
Oh no, I can't believe she asked that.
Well, she did. But it actually stopped me in my tracks and made me think about how I had behaved over a period of time that actually had contributed to it. It wasn't the be-all and end-all, but it had contributed. And on another time, they love asking you these curly questions that make you squirm in your chair. I was sitting there and she said, "What do you do for fun?" And I'd had no idea what to say. I was completely speechless, and I sat there thinking, she's expecting me to say something here.
Yeah.
And
did you feel like, oh my God, I'm such a boring person? Because I felt like that sometimes.
I felt exactly that. I'm such a boring person, I don't do anything for fun. And I said, I actually can't think of one thing that I do for fun. Fun had left the building some time ago. And she said, okay.
Well, we're not allowed to have fun.
Well, no, there wasn't time to have fun because you're looking after everybody else. Yeah. So she said, right, before you come back for your next appointment, I want you to find something, an activity that you are willing to do. I want you to do it and tell me all about it when you come back. I thought, okay.
Wow, she gave you some good homework.
She sure did.
So what did you do?
I went home, got up the laptop and typed in fun things to do in Perth.
What were the suggestions? I want to know.
Well, all these suggestions started coming up and I was going, I'm thinking, gosh, there is so much you can do. And then I found it. I found the one thing that I knew was going to be a whole heap of fun. Okay. And the best news about that too was that it wasn't going to be just me doing it. So when my husband got home, I said, darling, guess what? I've signed us up for swing dance classes.
Aww, lovely.
They are so much fun. Love the music, love the vibe. It's just so energetic. And when you're in the moment, just swinging around, doesn't matter how good or bad you are, whether you stuff up the steps.
Are you sure? You're a perfectionist.
I know.
What happened when you put a foot wrong?
Or then I'm terribly sorry. But yeah, I do like to try and practice.
Were you able to have fun without being a perfectionist during the swing dance?
I've let go a lot of the perfectionism. It's still there, but it was great. And the best thing, of course, was that I was doing it with my husband, because we were like ships in the night.
Yeah.
We were both so busy that we weren't spending time doing stuff together that was fun for us as a couple. And although he was like, "You want me to do what?" he knew it was important to me, so he went. And we did it for a long time after that. Then, unfortunately, swing dance classes stopped because of COVID.
Oh, well,
But
hopefully they'll start again.
They're starting up about now, so because it's a social dance and you change partners all the time, so that wasn't on, but it's coming back shortly. So that for me was a lifesaver. Being out in the open and then dancing to music, because I love music, and it just puts me in my happy place.
And having that support person as well. It's just so important to have that support network, isn't it?
If I hadn't had my husband who said, "I have no idea what you're going through, I can't understand it," because he'd never experienced anything like this himself. But I knew he loved me and I love him, and we were just there to support each other, and he was there for me every step of the way. So when I said, "I feel so terrible about having to go see a psychologist," what do you think the psychologist thinks of a doctor having to go and see them about, burning out? And he said, you're probably just one of his other sort of many doctors who have burnt out, so that you just, nothing special about you.
Now I realise that every second doctor is burnt out. When you go through it, you think you're the only one, and you think, wow, I'm such a dud. But then you realise that everyone else is on antidepressants, or they have anxiety, or they have this and that. It's just so common. And I love that now people are more open about talking about mental health. It's less stigmatized now. Yeah. We still have a lot of room for manoeuvring and getting better. We do, and it's so ironic that we are health professionals, and yet there's so much shame with having a mental illness.
Yep. Well, it was seen as a career-limiting thing. You didn't tell anybody that you had been diagnosed with depression.
There was a threat that they might dob you into the medical board.
Absolutely. You'd lose your registration.
And that you were seen as incompetent.
Nobody wants to be looked after by an incompetent doctor.
Yeah, so there was a real, it wasn't a perceived threat, it was a very real,
it was a real threat
of losing your career. So I think that's partly one of the barriers with seeking help. When you're in those kind of professions where you're expected to always be highly functioning. So I don't know about you, but for me, it took me a really long time to accept that there was anything wrong. I was just like, no, I'm fine, I'll keep going. It took ages for me to actually admit, I'm really, really unwell, and I need help from somebody else.
Yes.
And that's hard when especially if you're an independent, kind of self-sufficient person, to suddenly let someone else look after you. That's a big trust experiment. I didn't know if I could trust another doctor to look after me, so.
Well, my episode with the osteopath happened on a Friday afternoon. It was coming into a long weekend, and I thought, I'll be fine by Tuesday. No. But anyway,
I also thought I'll just rest for a week and then I'll be fine.
Be fine.
4 years later, finally off medications, but it took a very long time. And I definitely don't want to downplay the role of medications. If you need it, you need it. There's no shame in taking tablets.
Absolutely.
But maybe let's talk about some of the other things that help. We've talked about dancing and the music. I do think that doing something creative is good, especially if you have like a sciencey job. It's good to use the other side of the brain. So I liked drawing and listening to music. So I was really lucky in that the place where I was in hospital for 6 weeks, they had art therapy and music therapy. And that actually helped me a lot. Yeah. I actually think that helped me more than some of the other stuff, more than the tablets or the psychology sessions.
Losing yourself in the creative space.
Yeah, so I think that can be helpful. And also it's a mindful thing. It's senses, again, colors, music, all of those things.
I think it comes back to giving ourselves permission to play.
Yeah,
we get so serious about everything we do, and life is hard and work is tough. We forget that it's really important to have time out just to chill, be still, and play. Our kids play.
Yeah.
So why don't we play more?
Play is good.
Play is very good because it helps us to make sense of the world, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. If you're doing something that...
Well, you have to be curious, I guess, to play.
Yeah, just stay curious as to what this is all about, what it might look like. and not worry about how good it is.
That's true.
So what else has been helpful for you?
Well, setting the boundaries, it's such a boring idea, but it's so important to say no. And it's taken me a long time to be able to say no in a nice way, because I can be very 0 to 100 sometimes, so I don't know how to find the in-between sometimes. So I want to say no without sounding too savage. So I've had to learn how to say no in a nice way. And I actually learned how to say no from other people saying no to me. So last year, the year before, I just want to share with you the best rejection I ever received, because that helped me in how I say no to things now. So it was around the time of the book coming out, and I was given a very, very short deadline to try and get someone important to read the book and say something nice about it. But obviously it was a very short time frame to get someone who's already busy to try and write me something. And one writer who I respect a lot didn't have time for it. And he rejected me in the nicest way. He said, look, I think your book is very important and urgently necessary, so said some very nice things about it. And he said, but I don't think I can give it the time that it deserves. And I thought, oh, that's a really nice way of saying no. So I steal that now, and that's what I say. I say, I'm sorry, I don't think I've got the time that it deserves. So sometimes you have to pick up phrases here and there that worked for you. You think, oh, that's a nice way of saying no. And so...
Because it lets you understand that they're in that position where they're under the pump themselves for whatever reason. And taking on that extra thing, they could do it. But they can choose not to, because they're looking after themselves. And how refreshing is that?
And also you
doing it in a respectful way.
And also in a genuine way, because I know that he was very busy at the time, but since then I got another opportunity. He was one of the curators for Brisbane Writers Festival, and I got an invitation for that. So it was a really nice way for him to say, hey, like 2 years ago I couldn't help you, but I still, think your work is great, and I still want you to be involved in this. So that made me feel like it was a genuine rejection back then, that he really was busy, but he still thinks I'm worthy. So that was really nice. And so even if you do sometimes have to reject things to protect yourself, because if you've got too much else going on, you can still do it in a nice way that you're not burning any bridges, and you can still work with that person in the future. So you're still kind of looking after your work and other relationships while still respecting yourself and protecting your boundaries. And I think that's a balance that sometimes can be difficult for a lot of people.
Can be very difficult. You might set yourself a boundary, but keeping to those boundaries is the tricky part. I've got some delightful friends who keep me accountable.
That's good.
So every so often they'll say, Jenny, you're not walking your talk. And it's like, and then I know it's time just to pull my head in and just reset those boundaries and do those things I know will be keeping me sustained for longer. So if we were to start wrapping this up, what do you think we could do differently? There's a great experiment going on in the UK at the moment. 70 companies have signed up to do the 4-day working week.
I was hoping you would bring that up. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the 4-day week.
I'm not so much of a fan of the 4-day week.
Okay.
I'm a fan of the 3-day weekend.
Oh, I see what you did there.
But it's very interesting. I mean, there's been a lot of sort of push towards, we now understand that working too hard for too long is damaging to people. But how do you bring about that change and make it work? And it's very interesting listening to some of the conversations about the 4-day working week. Some people have adopted it and it's worked really, really well. Others tried it and it didn't work so well. So maybe that's something our audience can share with us too, what their thoughts are about working a 4-day week. Where you work 4 days a week, you're still expected to get the same amount of stuff done, and you still get the same pay as if you were working 5 days.
I reckon I would be more productive over 4 days, knowing that I've got an extra day to just enjoy.
Yep. Because
does anyone here do a 4-day week at the moment? Yes.
Oh yes, there
I love that. There are people here who do it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it.
Sorry?
Even in medicine and
Excellent.
Wow.
I love that.
That's great. Yeah. And I think we live in very interesting times because we're coming towards the post-pandemic era. And I think we've all learned so much about ourselves during this time, all of that stuff we've gone through, all the challenges we've faced, dealing with all the issues around mental health challenge and burnout, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think now, this is the time to bring about real change, enduring, sustainable, positive change, to make everything work better for us. So I think, this is great. And I think the 4-day working week is part of this process. We won't get it all right straight away, but I think if we're willing to explore and try it out, then we can start to see what does, support us to be the best.
Clicking the reset button, isn't it?
It is exactly.
Yeah, because you get to redesign your life exactly how you want to live it.
Yeah.
And don't care about what other people say or think about the way you do it, because you're only living for yourself. And if the 4-day week works for you, then I think you should do it.
Yep. So it's about autonomy, isn't it? It's feeling that you've got the choice in the matter, and having the support of other people around you in that too, whether it's your family or your friends or in the workplace itself. There's so many things we could be doing differently that I think will make make it a better thing for all of us, so that we feel happy and healthy. And wouldn't it be great if we bounced out of bed on a Monday morning thinking, yes, going to work, bring it on.
Well, I do that on a Tuesday because I get Mondays off now.
Ah, right, okay. Which is good, yes.
Yeah. So having that choice back, I think, is very empowering, especially if you've gone through burnout where you're like, I don't want to do Mondays anymore.
And obviously it depends on the industry you're in,
yeah,
your
of
work
course,
is set up, et cetera, et cetera.
Not everyone, I guess, has the privilege of that choice.
No,
sometimes you're in a situation where you can't, or you have to work 2 jobs. It's not always possible. So I guess you have to make these choices within your own, I guess, structure that you already have.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important to have these conversations to talk about our reality and our challenges, and to just look at what we could be doing differently. I think that's the key.
Well, should we open it up to questions? I think
that'd be a very good idea. Has anybody got a question or a comment?
And is there a roaming mic?
Is there a running mic?
Thank you, Offa.
Difficult to see in here, isn't it?
It is. There's a bright light. We're
bright
deer
lights.
in the headlights.
Yes.
Hi, thanks.
Hello.
I just wanted to address what you mentioned before about millennials and what's causing them to burn out more. And as an older millennial, we were just briefly chatting about it, and I think we came up with sort of 2 parts of a whole. But from my point of view, it's that there is no security. If you do not own a home, you do not have you're on a rental, you're on someone else's sufferance, especially in Perth at the moment, of course, because there's 30 people going to every rental.
Wow.
And if you get behind on the rent, or you upset the landlord in some way, or they don't want to repair something and you press for it, they can just kick you out. They don't really need much of a reason. They can just say, we're looking for a different tenant, or we're thinking about selling, or whatever it is. And not having any security is incredibly stressful. And I think that's a major contributing factor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
That's a great point.
Can I add to that? I'm 60 and I'm just experiencing the same thing.
Right.
It's the same in Sydney. I'm on a rental and they've just sold it and I'm going, they're going to kick me out. But luckily the new landlord happy for me to stay on.
Yep.
Of course, he increased my rent, but
of course.
I feel you, not having that long-term security.
Yeah, the financial security especially, that's a very scary place to be in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies, for a really interesting topic panel.
Hello, there you are.
I just wanted to touch on the scourge of busyness, and you alerted to it earlier in your presentation. It's something I've been probably not so tactfully calling out amongst my peers for some time, probably some 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for doing it more subtly? Because, I just don't see it as a badge of honour.
No, it's not a badge of honour at all. It's terrible.
And my friends still use it like that, and I call them out, but not so politely.
I don't really have tact either. I feel like I
I
might be better at that. I don't know.
I don't think we need to be polite about it. I really do think we should call it out because it's a nonsense. It really is a nonsense, and for too long we've accepted it. And I think unless we actually start saying, this is not on, this is totally unacceptable, otherwise we're condoning it. And it self-perpetuates. When our son went through university here, the culture in that particular department was ridiculous in that they would be set projects to do with a very finite deadline. You know, the work had to be in by a certain time on a certain day, otherwise you were custard. But in order to meet that deadline, they often had to pull all-nighters. And I'm thinking, in what day and age did that ever become okay? I mean, in medical school, it was tough, but did you ever pull an all-nighter for studying in medical school?
I have a feeling that maybe for assignments I might have done it once or twice.
But it wasn't it wasn't something that was being encouraged or pushed.
No,
And
no.
I think,
it was mainly because I was more of a last-minute kind of girl.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But I think we've got so used to talking about things that they've become normalised. So it's normal to be ridiculously busy. Well, it's not normal.
Well, I think it's more about like positively reinforcing rest rather than criticizing
Absolutely,
people
yes.
for talking too much
Yep.
about busyness. I'll be like,
Yep.
oh, well, make sure you get a rest. That's what I say now. Then you come across as like caring. You say,
Yep.
that sounds like a really tough time. You should, go do something nice for
Yep.
yourself, or make encouraging suggestions like that.
Yep.
But because it can be annoying when people go, oh, I worked this many days, and it's like, well, it's not a competition.
Yeah, it's not a competition. You're not going to get a medal for it.
Yeah.
No. And I think we've got to remind ourselves that the science is very clear on this. It doesn't work. It's counterproductive. And if we really want to be more effective, more productive, and enjoy more of what we do, it's those little mini breaks, micro breaks during the day.
Yeah.
There used to be
fan of sleep now.
And I'm a big fan of sleep. I
Yeah.
love my sleep. But in the olden times, people used to work from 9 to 5. They'd have a mid-morning break. They'd have an hour for lunch.
Yeah.
And then they'd have
Afternoon tea.
And at 5 o'clock, closed the door, went home, did not think about work again until the following day.
Now if people did that, they would be called lazy, you know?
Exactly.
But now there's a Japanese cartoon called The Lazy Egg Gudetama, so I feel like maybe lazy is cool now among
The
young
lazy what?
people. The Lazy Egg
The lazy egg.
Gudetama. It's actually coming to Netflix soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I should look forward to
So I
that.
hope Netflix will make being lazy a good thing.
Good.
And not feel bad.
And not feel bad about it.
Lazy has such negative connotations, but it's resting is good.
Rest is essential.
So,
Essential.
rather than putting down people who keep talking about being busy, maybe we should celebrate people who rest.
Absolutely.
Like,
I'm with you
yes,
on that.
nap queen,
Yes. Yes. Any more questions?
Oh, hi, I'm up the back here.
Hello.
Hi. I've just got a quick question about what your thoughts are on the 4-day working week. And I guess my thoughts are that people typically feel overwhelmed when they don't feel they have the resources to achieve what they need to achieve in a defined period of time. And if you're still expected to complete 5 days worth of work, but now in 4 days, that's going to put even more pressure on people to produce more in the time that they're at work. So I think if you're able to control your own workload, let's say you're the boss, for example, you may be able to be more successful at that than an employee where the boss expects them to continue to produce the same amount of work but in a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
My concern is that might lead to more burnout. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's a good point, and I think it has to do with the intensity of the work.
Yes.
So if the 4 days are super intense and you're okay with the amount of intensity, then and you're able to get it done in the 4 and enjoy the 3 days, that's great. But if you're someone who prefers not to have that intensity and would rather work shorter days but work 6 days, some people do that.
Yep.
I guess it's all about distributing the same amount of hours over whatever number of days suits you.
Yep.
Also, some people would prefer to work 2 half days instead of a full day.
Yep.
Other people would prefer to work longer days and get the extra day off. So I feel like it's personal preference. So while I generally would prefer to work longer days for 4 days and get the 3 days off, I can see how some people would find that too intense and would rather divide the work over more days.
But I think your point about the resources is very important, because if you're already struggling to get through your work because you haven't got the resources or support available to you,
or childcare, or
the 4-day working week is not going to be helpful at all. It's going to make things worse. So it's not an answer for everybody.
Yeah, and I do know that for some people who they do need to drop off their kids off at work at 8:30 or whatever, or need to start work a bit late because they've got caring or other sort of duties. They may have to work shorter days and not be able to pack everything in the 4 days, and that's okay. But I think it's more having the support of whoever is your boss to come in when you can. And I think it's also about trust. If you do have to come in late some days, or if you've got a medical appointment, or if you have caring responsibilities, other kind of life responsibilities, having a boss who trusts that you will get the work done, even if you start a bit late on some days, or need to take time off during the day to go to your medical appointment or psychology appointment, things like that. So I feel like a lot of it's having a good relationship with the people that you work with.
It comes down to trust and respect, and understanding each other sufficiently well.
Yeah, because I do know that when some people work from home, there can be cynicism. They go, are they really working when they say they're working from home? Like, or are they, playing games or something?
Well, I tell you what, if anybody puts monitoring software on my laptop to see if I was working at home, I wouldn't be staying working for that company.
I don't think I would be either if I were working from home. Yeah.
Is there one last question from the audience?
Sorry, right down the back here. I work as a chef, so the idea of working 4 days a week is fantastic. But what about, are people going to want to eat 4 days a week?
Yes.
Can we have a like Wednesday to Sunday, Wednesday to Saturday eating, and no one goes out to dinner on Monday and Tuesday, so the chefs can have days off?
I think that sounds a fantastic idea. Intermittent fasting is meant to be quite good for us, so maybe that's something we could examine. But exactly right. I mean, not every industry is going to fit into that type of work routine. And kudos to you for being a chef, because I think that's a really tough gig.
Tough hours.
Tough hours, really tough hours. Love eating your food, by the way. Thank you.